Wake up, buy here, pay here people. It's a beautiful day. Go grab yourself another cup of joe and say hello to Jim and Michelle Rhoads on the Buy Here, Pay Here Morning Show. Take it away, you two.
Hello, everybody.
Hey,
Happy
welcome.
Friday.
Why'd you slip into Scooby-Doo voice there? Where'd that come
Oh,
from?
well, you know, I have a voice for just about everything. He's always teasing me. Even when a fly is flying around, I'm like,
It's always there's voices.
It's getting away from you, Jim.
It's entertaining. It keeps my day interesting around here. So
It does.
Yeah.
Well, you know, I mean, hey, I love being comic relief in our household.
uh-huh.
Mhm.
So
Jim's pretty
yeah,
funny
so
too,
quick
but-
update. I mean, we
Mhm.
got we're at Friday. We got the time change coming up.
Don't
this weekend.
forget,
Yep.
change your clocks.
And of course, most of you are aware this is Bedlam football weekend. Everybody knows what that is, except for Michelle.
me.
Except for Michelle. So no, that's and it's
Oh,
believed to be
okay.
the last time for the foreseeable future. Be the last time they play because Oklahoma
Why?
is leaving the conference, moving to the SEC, and so the
Oh.
100+ year rivalry between Oklahoma. You know, I'm an Oklahoma State guy, and you know it's kind of to
Mhm.
call it a rivalry. I think Oklahoma has won 4 or 5 for every one that Oklahoma State's won, but we're pulling for the Cowboys over here to see if they can pull
So
one off.
then they have no chance in ever playing again, even in a bowl?
Well, it could happen. It could happen in a bowl,
Okay.
and they could end up having non-conference, game.
You know, I can see Mike Wallman laughing at me in the
Yeah.
background.
Yeah, So, yeah.
Yes, I don't do football, but I love to cook for it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
she's great for that. Yeah,
Yeah.
But
absolutely.
anyway, we got that coming up, so we're kind of paying attention to that. And Wallman's Mike in particular is a big Bengals fan. We got the Wallman standing by. We got Keith Thacker. This is so fun for us, bringing
Yeah.
dealers to dealers.
Yeah,
Like this is just
it
it's
is.
part of what we can do with the morning show is find out from dealers how they're handling things.
Absolutely. Keith, you might be able to, because I see you're kind of popping in and out. If you put it on your cell phone and just use your camera from your cell phone, that might help. If you're just using cell signal, if you've got a good cell signal there.
Yeah.
Alrighty. Any other announcements?
I don't think so.
The dealer forum. Isn't that this next week?
It starts the 13th, Monday the 13th.
Yeah, so that is the week after next.
After,
What is
yeah.
So it's coming up here pretty soon. That's going to be in Indianapolis,
Mhm.
and the format looks amazing. For how they're going to be doing this. This is not like a regular conference. This is basically like a conference of 20 groups in a way. And so giving you the opportunity to sit at different tables and talk about different topics, and that's the majority of the education while you're there is with colleagues and all of that. So if you haven't already booked your ticket, I know you can still get them. I think that the discounted hotel rates are gone, but go ahead and get on niada.com and you can get more information there.
Very good.
What else?
I don't have a thing. I think we should bring in our distinguished guest. We have standing by. I'm going to bring him in. We got Mr. Keith Thacker joining from Kentucky.
Hi.
This is so fun for us because,
Thank you guys for having us.
Pardon?
I said thank you all for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
Good. Hang in there with us. On our side, your image is freezing a little bit, but the audio is intact. So just stay with us, and the stream may come and go a little bit.
So let's talk a little bit about why we have these gentlemen on the show today, and what kind of brought that about, and a little bit about their history.
Yeah. So we actually know the Wallmans. We've worked with them in Ohio in the past
for about a year.
So we by the way have enjoyed watching many of the things that you guys.
Oh, well, we'll talk about that in a minute.
Yeah. And then Keith Thacker, we've known. Keith is one of those people that you know so many people from Facebook. You chat with them in the groups, and you're involved in conversation together. We had a chance to meet Keith at the conference a couple of years ago in person, but we just kind of saw a thread. I think it was on the poll that I had put out before about, in this time of economic struggle, are we changing our practices? And if so, are we clamping down? Are we getting more flexible, et cetera? And I think you guys chimed in on that particular thread, if I remember which conversation it was. But these two were actually in the conversation together. So I was just
Well,
intrigued.
wasn't it a different thread, like an all new thread, Justin, that you posted?
Yeah, I had asked a question about some of those extensions or amendments.
Oh, that's okay.
Yeah.
What some dealers, policy was behind granting that permission to a customer or collector.
So Keith was actually responding to that one instead.
Yes.
I gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just saw that and I thought, it's interesting that particular conversation just is kind of, representative of what's got to be going through a lot of dealers' heads out there right now, a lot of changes. So we wanted to ask each of you first, and I'll start with you, Wallman's. Like, I know you guys have been in business many years out there and got a good sized portfolio. And I'm wondering kind of what your philosophy or approach has been to collections, generally speaking. If I made, a one, the lowest, most, lenient, flexible that you could be, and 10 being super strict, where would you put your number, Justin, in terms of where have you guys been, just as a company overall?
I would say that we've always hovered around a 7.
Okay.
And
I can't read that, Mike. What does it say? 7. Oh, is this like the dating game?
Nice. This is fun. This is fun. Good.
By the way.
Yeah.
And we use that practice consistently since day one up until now. And so we felt if we, kept that same approach, and we kind of know that, we're conducting business the same, and then we just have to make sure we're cognizant about, external factors, like you mentioned, Jim, about, some of the economic struggles. But at least we can kind of go back on, hey, we're practicing this way, and then we can adapt and change up depending on what's going on around us.
Right.
Right on.
Got it. And
Keith.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I had a 7 in my mind as well today, but we've actually transitioned to a 7. We didn't start at a 7. I've been running the collection side for about 7 years. And when I first started, I was probably a 2. We were very lenient. We really didn't take a whole lot of promise to pays, and we're just like, pay when you can and stuff, but that gets out of hand pretty quick. So I started getting involved with 20 groups, and I've been fortunate to be a member of several different great 20 groups with some of the changes in the industry up until now. And so now we're probably a 7, and it just, we started really lax and just kind of moved to more progressive stern. We still think that customers, the pandemic has shown us they'll pay if they have the money to pay. In the pandemic, when a lot of the money was being exchanged freely, they paid crazy well. So we still want to make sure that we're keeping good people that will pay us into our cars, but hold them accountable too.
There's something, and this is not a squirrel, but this is something that what you just said, I found so fascinating. Is, we talk about the persona of our customer, and that they're slackabouts, and that they don't pay, and
Some say that.
This is something that I see a lot of, how dealers view the overall buy here, pay here customer. A lot of dealers is slack about, don't pay. They'll screw you. They'll da da da. I just find it fascinating that you saw a huge difference when they had more money in their pocketbook. They made their payment. So maybe part of the reason that they don't pay as well as they could is because they have less money, which is another squirrel about, let's make sure we don't put them in a car payment they can't afford. So, yeah. And
that goes back to underwriting. But I think for today, we really, so obviously you can underwrite the deal well today, and their circumstances could change tomorrow. So we're many of us dealing with that sort of thing. So I think for today, we all understand underwriting could affect tomorrow. I really wanted to focus really on collections, on the existing portfolio that we have, and kind of how you're pivoting with that. So, Keith, as I heard you talk about that and tightening up a little bit, I wonder, what does that mean? When you say you're more strict, are you strict in terms of demanding dollars, or are you demanding a written understanding, or how are you tightening up on that?
So the first thing, and this sounds so silly, but one of the first things that we changed when we were having that progression from lenient to more stern is when the customer calls and asks for an extension, the first thing we say is no. Mm-hmm. We used to say yes for everyone. Hey, can I pay a double payment next Friday? Absolutely. Well, now we start with no. Okay. And if they say, well, we really can't do it before we get off the phone, then we make some type of agreement. But the first answer when they ask for any kind of arrangement is, no, we can't do that.
Yeah.
And it's not, and consider it, no, it's like, no, the payment's $100 this Friday or $120 this Friday. We're really going to need the payment. And then if they say, well, I had something come up, I had some maintenance bills at the apartment or whatever, then we can make a promise to pay agreement going forward. But some things we're doing differently is we want to make sure that we say no at first, and then before we get off the phone, we come to some type of agreement that ultimately gets them back on track. So we don't want to just say, yeah, you can make a double payment sometime in the future. We want to make sure that we're ironing out that promise all the way through to getting them back current.
Quick question, Keith, on that. Do you require any documentation? If it's a financial reason.
We don't. We don't do extensions or refinances, I guess is what I really mean. So if we're doing like a refinance, a rewrite of the contract because a payday has switched, or if someone got COVID and we're doing a a deferral of 2 payments to the end or something, we require proof on those type of things. But if someone is staying on the same frequency and they just need to make a partial or postpone a payment till next Friday or something to make a double, we don't require any documentation.
And I think it's important before we come back, Mike, I want to hear your feedback on that. I want to say just for our listeners that when we talk about things like extensions and modification, all this different terminology, which I'll try to clear up as we go, but the actual matter of modifying a contract, that can vary by state a little bit. They're getting into some state specific things. And so just be aware that.
That was actually something as we were getting ready this morning. Jim was like, let's just make sure that everyone listening fully understands that you need, before you change any policies or actually before you enact any, you need to make sure that you are compliant with your state law.
Yeah, just remember, Jim and Michelle Rhoads. Jim and Michelle Rhoads in the Buy Here Pay Here Morning Show do not offer legal advice. This is simply an operational
Sometimes
discussion.
we play like we're ones, but we're just actors.
Yeah. So this is just, we know these things can vary, and we're not obviously advocating for anything that would be unethical or unlawful. So we be aware of what you can and can't do. So, but let's just kind of stick to policy. So Mike, what have you guys seen? We didn't get a chance to hear from you in terms of kind of what your view has been of the collections approach overall.
Well, I think, something that Justin said is that 7, that consistency since we kind of started this. And, Keith, I had a quick question for you. What DMS do you use?
We use Frazier.
Frazier? Yeah, that's what we used to use. And we really didn't feel like we had quite the ability to extend as much or amend as much as we do now with our current IDMS. Comes off as quite a bit easier now to do. And with our new DMS, the button's more available, things like that. But
before the pandemic, there was no way to even extend payments. But when the pandemic happened, you have the right to pause payments, and then they added that almost immediately when they started laying people off and stuff and shutting things down, and that moves the payments, whatever number you pick, just moves it to the end of the contract. But it is a refinance, so that's exactly how it works. It's still a rewrite of the contract.
Okay.
I think there's 2 things in my opinion, Jim. You have a little bit of that collector availability to do that, but they're probably pushed because of the recent economic times. But we know that if we open the door a little too much here and over here, what are we dealing with? Should we say no? Should we have some finite rules? But it is getting a little harder out there. But we want to listen to everybody's situation and make sure that if we can adapt or we can help within reason. So it's just kind of like this finesse area that we feel like we're in. And I think that's what's good for the discussion, because you have a couple different credentials where this fall under. It's falling under where you might be having to do it a little bit more. But then once you kind of turn that dial, now maybe the consumer thinks that we can do it again. Maybe that one of the collectors knows that that's an acceptable approach by the financing company, and maybe we continue to do this. So that's where kind of like you don't want to cut your face to spite your nose. Cut your nose to spite your face. That's right. But you want to help people out. So I think there's a reason for it. So that's what we're currently seeing, and what originally
Yeah.
I just wanted to, how we posted out to that and was trying to get some feedback from everyone.
Sure.
I'm like a huge, I may not have worked in the buy here, pay here world, but I've worked with teams that have to deal with angry customers.
Yeah.
And you know, I love kind of like what, well, that the first answer is no. That's like policy. That's like, we're going through the thing and the first answer is no. The second, you know, and like getting to a point where it's like, that you're still firm, because I mean, white hat way, all of that, it's about being kind, but it's also about being firm. And you know, that's like, this is our agreement. This is our understanding. And so the very last thing we're going to do is go against the agreement. So we're going to find ways to be able to help you be able to fulfill your side of the agreement.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that's, you know, we're also talking about just basic human behavior, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we have, so Keith, you talked about the thing about, you know, developing the practice of saying no. I've done it in collections training. We've brought out a mirror and had people, just to be kind of, you know, to overstate it, it's like, you know, let's practice looking in the mirror and practice saying no. And just, it doesn't mean, like Michelle mentioned, the, you know, kind of the white hat element of this. It doesn't mean that we're not going to work with the customer. It's just that we have to hold the customer accountable to the understanding. And so we always kind of use the terminology that, you know, Friday means Friday. That's still our understanding unless we replace it with a new understanding. And so this is what we're trying to hold customers accountable to that. However, we're in a climate now where, you know, we're seeing income reduced, or even at the same income, obviously living expenses are much higher. So the question becomes, you know, are we prepared to adapt strategy overall in the interest of not losing some customers, because they're feeling a lot of pressure, aren't they, Keith?
Yes. Yeah, we're seeing that. I mean, but at the end of the day, we have to make sure the car's affordable for the customer. Okay. And then we can't let, in my opinion, the worst thing that we can do is sell a car to a customer and then take payment arrangements that allow them to get so far behind that ultimately we end up taking the car back.
Sure.
You know, when we end up creating this problem over a long period of time because we allow, like, well, okay. And then it gets to a point that we're like, we can't have it this far past due anymore. And then we take the car from the customer. That is a failure of collections, in my opinion. Now, someone that just won't communicate with you and won't make the payments, that's unavoidable. That's really, you know, the customer's choice. But if we allow the communicating customer to get X number of days past due, and then because of our collection policies, it becomes an escalated problem, that's our fault. We failed the customer. We allowed them to straggle out that far, and we just don't really want to do that to our customers. So we try to hold them to the payment arrangements. We understand that they can't make their payments, or they won't, between now and 2 or 3 years from now. Something's going to happen that we're going to have to work with them on a payment, and that's okay as long as they're communicating with us and upholding that promise to pay.
I'm so glad you talked about that. I don't hear that enough, about the idea that, you know, when I do say no to a customer, even though it doesn't feel like it to the customer at the time, in a way we could be doing them a favor, because when we allow them to dig a hole, it can be difficult for them to climb out. And so I think sometimes when we say no and try to hold them accountable, then that can be a thing. Keith, before I jump back to the Wallmans, I want to find out, do you accept partial payments?
We do.
Okay, good. And Justin, do you guys on your end, do you take partials?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, we could probably have a whole episode around that alone. We
Partial
see
payments.
that there's, you know, dealers feel strongly about that. Some do, some don't. And so I think it's a time where it feels to me like we're going to have to be adaptive, and this would be amongst the ways that we would do it. And I'm really resistant always to anything that modifies the contract. Like, I always am going to advocate for trying to keep the terms of the contract where they are. Go ahead, Keith.
I agree totally. We the only really reason that we'll do a rewrite is like major illnesses,
Sure.
you know, like heart attack, strokes, cancer, or a pay date change. And we do that. Like if we have a weekly payer that's moving to semi-monthly, we would rather them just be on semi-monthly so they're not on our collections report all the time. But we require pay stubs to do that.
Yeah. And I think this is so interesting. Like, I hear you say that, and I think, you know, sometimes I feel like these folks, whether it's a state level or national level, CFPB, whatever, I think they don't fully appreciate I'll call it the disciplinary element that is buy here, pay here, like having, like you're talking about, changing to a customer's pay schedule. Why? Well, because the customer can manage that biweekly. If they're getting paid biweekly, they can manage that better. And I just think folks don't seem to understand that often. So Justin, you guys have been doing this a long time. I know you've observed that. I want to come back and talk about some of the other things that Keith touched on there, but like what do you see? You said you do partial payments, so you're flexible in that way. What about modifications? Are you permitted to do modifications, and are there circumstances under which?
Yeah, we're able to do that. It was never really a practice that we've instituted many years ago. If our DMS didn't have the capability and things like that, and I grew up around it being a little bit more on the stern but fair, side. And I'm not saying, of course, we would help somebody out that might have been past due for a while, and then finally, to give them some light at the end of the tunnel, they came up with an X amount, and then we said, okay, you know what, we're going to go clean slate. Thanks for trying, and we're going to get you back on track. The only thing that we're seeing now, I mean, obviously, we're seeing a little uptick in delinquency. Repossessions are a little bit higher. And we've tried to lower our ACV a little bit and some increased sales. And then some of that comes with increased repos. So with that being said, combined with what's going on with the economy, we've been having to do a little bit more of that. Okay, we'll push it to the end of the loan. But I feel like we're maybe doing it maybe too frequently. And with loan modifications, amendments, of course, that creates another step where you have to get it signed. And that's another thing where it's difficult. You're not in front of the customer. So that facilitation process gets a little difficult. So, we said, hey, as long as we get everything signed, and for a couple of reasons, like with, Keith said, maybe an illness or, the problem is with job changes we're seeing is that's a prevalent thing in our industry, you know? And so that's something that a job, if I answer a phone call and somebody changes it, I could easily take that same phone call with somebody else 2 days later. So am I amending every two? So we're just in that, we're trying to finesse it. And, specifically our collectors get paid on, delinquency bonuses, where I know, Jim, you're not a big fan of delinquency bonuses. But so we just have a little bit of like all that we're trying to, just watch right now, observe. We haven't taken any real immediate intervention, but we're seeing it. We're seeing the button getting clicked. We're seeing what's kind of going on, and we understand that if we do it, we may help them get on track. We don't want it to result in an immediate repossession, but we also know it's a cash flow business, and we have to make sure we recoup our money without extending too many options where we feel like maybe we're then getting taken advantage of. So it's a slippery slope. We just have to watch and observe. And but I would like to tighten something up. But I don't want to be short-sighted in that degree.
And I hear you. The idea of kind of sitting on those modifications, for example, is just one thing that we've talked about. And when you jokingly said I'm not a fan of those, like we try to share, here's the price that you could pay, right, on either side of this, the price for certain things. And I know, Keith, imagine if I'm your customer, and you financed the car to me 3 months ago, and I was doing everything on my payments, because the day I bought the car, you said it was real important to get the payments in on time, and now I come to you with a fall behind or whatever. And now you modify my contract and push my payments back. And I'm just so relieved. I thought the day I bought the car, I thought you told me I was going to need to make all these payments on time. Now I find out all you got to do is go to your computer and punch a few buttons, and you can change the terms of the contract. So that's such a relief to me. I'm so glad to know that I don't need to worry so much about getting the payments in on time. Right. I mean, isn't that the natural place that we end up as a consumer? So
I learned the contract modification the hard way. I learned all my lessons the hard way. I just started doing collections, and I've been around the buy here, pay here business my whole life, but I really wasn't around the collection side of it much. It was more around the recon center. And so we had these customers that were behind. I'm like, well, if we refinance them, they won't be behind anymore. And so I refinanced a bunch of customers that were behind to get them back on track, because I thought once we get them on track, they would stay on track. And what I found out is I just delayed the repossession. I just refinanced the customer and gave them more time. So we still do rewrites, but I'm just really, really cautious of it because of the problems I've caused myself in the past.
And that's what I would say. You just kind of need a gatekeeper solution, right? You need a policy where that can be done, but we've got to verify that it's, legitimate, because one of the things that we see is when we grant too much authority out there at the collector level, or maybe even a collection supervisor, that sometimes what can happen is that gets the volume of that gets to be higher than we realize, and we start to suffer for it in cash flow, as you mentioned. I mean, the delinquency report looks great, but in collection efficiency, suddenly the bank deposits are not where they had been, and so those kind of things can creep in if we allow too much of that. So, as much as anything, we would just always advise that the dealer is familiar with how much of that is happening, so they kind of play a gatekeeper role. So, anything for you guys to add, Wallmans, on that thought?
No, I just think maybe like the reasoning and the slippery slope, like Justin mentioned. I mean, once you're just too loose and that gray area, or maybe coming up with a process, unless you're, pretty in tune or finite or granular with that, it can be, pretty loose, and all the reasons in the world can kind of come about and to do it. But I think just maybe honing in on it and
yeah, it's, once you open that box with deferrals and modifications, just hard to put the lid back on that box. It's just kind of, once the customer's aware that that's a possibility, then it just, they get a little spoiled to it, and they kind of learn to expect it, or, so it's just natural that that's where we'd end up. So all the more reason for us to just be careful and say no, and keep saying no until we're just out of options, and figure out a way to get there.
One of the things that we noticed when we did that poll about clamping down or not, that and we phrased that so it was like, in collections, what's happening, and a lot of people chimed in about it's about underwriting, and yes, it is about underwriting
for the next 300
for the next 300 customers. So it is it's about making sure that they're in a vehicle that you aren't putting them to the absolute outside edge of what their AC or what their PTI is, or whatever, that it's like, this is a payment that you can make, because I from what Keith was talking about during COVID, when people were getting checks, they were paying on time, and so it's if what I hear from that too is, with the underwriting side, that if we are really careful that we're not putting them in a vehicle that's going to become difficult, there's more of a pinch, that's even better. And obviously there are a lot of people out there that they need to have an ACV that's like way lower than what it is that we typically
makes it sound
offer.
easy, right, guys?
It's not easy. And I do have to say, Wallmans, okay. I, like we said, that we've worked with the Wallmans, and we worked with them for about a year and had a really great time. And I watch what it is that you guys are doing. And I just want to say that one of the things that I really have enjoyed seeing when I get on your website is that you now have, like, there is a section of ACV where it's $500 down. This is what your payment's going to be. And it's about bringing some things into a more affordable range for some of your customers. And so when people come in and they see the Charger sitting out there in the corner of the lot, and it's like, I want that car. It's like, well, we're not going to, but we can do this. So it gives people, like, let's put you in something that we feel more comfortable with. So, thumbs up, high five, all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I'd love to see how you're adapting with that.
Yeah, really do.
So I think, go ahead. Did you have something else on that?
So thanks.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. We tried to just get a little bit more of the financial options out there a little bit easier, and we can adapt to, more of our clientele. And it's been better. And it's definitely, I think, helped in what we're facing with. And it's interesting because, inflation has pushed us everything, but cars have actually gotten a little less expensive. Maybe not for the consumer, but for us a little bit. And, we're still able to kind of keep a decent car payment and try to make that PTI parameters fit.
Yeah.
Without completely destroying, cash flow. So we're trying to, you gotta keep it tight. You gotta be fair. But yeah, that's what we're seeing.
So I want to hear from each of you on what you're seeing in your local area in terms of employment. Are you seeing employment remain pretty steady?
Keith?
I think, go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
We are in South Central Kentucky, and we've always been pretty isolated from a lot of the economic swings. We've got a couple industries here that are heavily tied to automotive, but we don't see the big real estate swings. We don't see the massive unemployment that, some areas see. So when the economy's going, boom, we just see, an increase in things slowly. When the economy's going bust, it just kind of, is a little bit different. So nothing has changed here really. Wages are still trending up. The biggest thing that we've seen in our local market, which isn't really a local thing, is subprime financing is tightening up. We see that with the customers that we're getting. It's not a drastic change, but we're seeing a little bit better job times, a little bit higher credit scores. But in terms of employment, really nothing's changing. Wages are going up just a little bit. There's a major factory here that employs a bunch of people, and they released a new rate sheet. I don't know how I got on the internet, but I was looking at it yesterday with my father, and so they're giving raises to the employees, and it was on a sheet, and so wages in this area are trending upwards.
Okay, good.
Excellent.
So I would that to me has always kind of been one of the measuring sticks. Like, I always said, the stock market can be up here doing dips and dives, and the economy can even do dips. But if your local employment is pretty stable, as long as your customer's employed, it doesn't affect you guys a ton, right? Out
for
there at
food
the
prices and gas prices.
Yeah, it's more the
utility
Let me
prices.
tell you what the biggest one was, in my opinion, was when rent doubled through the pandemic.
right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Kentucky had like a rent mandatorium where people didn't have to pay. There was money that they could qualify for, but that was a big drawn out process. A lot of people didn't pay utility bills in certain, so they had to move to other districts of our local area. And when they replaced the house that they were paying $500 a month for to $900 to $1,000, that was rough, because we went through a period of time where a lot of good 2-3 year paying customers brought the cars back and say, "Hey, I can't afford it." I'm like, "What's going on? Is it something that we can change in the agreement?" Because when someone is a perfect payer for 2.5-3 years and they're bringing their car back to you and saying this is their second car or something, like, I can't pay. And I'm like, man, let's make this car affordable for you. We want to continue to do business with you. You paid perfect for the last 200 weeks. Like, let's figure out something that, if I just need to make the payment fit your new income or something. But it was where they had switched housing, and it was a shocker to them. The cost of living, I say doubled, it's probably dramatic, but it significantly increased for sure. And that was a real hard adjustment for several of our good paying customers.
Absolutely. So what about you guys, Wallman? What are you seeing in terms of employment? Pretty stable in your area?
I think pretty stable. I don't hear too much about, high unemployment rates. I think we're probably a little faster paced than Keith, but being in the Midwest, we're not, on steroids by all means. So one thing we've noticed with our customers, we don't see tons of like longevity at the job. I think everybody is, bouncing around a little bit, trying to find and earn that next dollar to try to afford everything around them. But I don't think it's really a measure of trying to capture and go get a job. I think that's being done.
Just today, I was sort of kind of going over some stuff, and everything just seems pretty stable for the most part.
Good. And I guess the main thing, you're not seeing on your delinquency list a lot of people that have lost their jobs. That's not necessarily hitting us currently, which that would be devastating in some markets, especially. But I think as long as our people are employed, we can work through most everything with them. But obviously they're feeling some pressure, in there because of the cost of living and inflation, right? Those things are going up. And so I think, those are kind of things we could probably adapt to.
I went to the grocery store last week and I was going to have a heart attack. Are you serious?
And I think it's a lot of those more external factors than just about that job. I just think it's trying to afford everything around it.
Well, and that's, that kind of ties in. I know we've talked, I'm always like giving ideas to our clients about, well, how can you give back to your customers? And, simple things like on-time payments for 3 months. Here's win a drawing for $100 gas card or something like that. And so, just like, what can we do to help where the pinch is? Yeah. And, help you be able, and a carrot. There's a carrot, make your payment on time. That we give out 5 of these a month. And so, or whatever. And it makes a big difference.
Yeah. Food prices being what they are, they might be, drawing for a bag of carrots or something.
Exactly. So it's like really a literal bag of carrots. Make your payment on time. Come get your bag of carrots.
Don't come to me for promotional ideas. I'm probably not the one to talk to on that. So, no, I think we could probably wrap up there. There's so many more tangents and elements to that conversation. And one of the things that came up this week in our conversation with Seth Merrifield on Wednesday was this thing about having an open door policy in terms of when you have a new customer. That's what I've always called open door policies. Like at closing, what do you say to them if they're new to your business? What do you say to them about how you handle collections and how you want them to communicate and how flexible you are? Like, what do they understand about our approach? And so we look forward to bringing that back. Go ahead, Keith.
Yeah, well, I mean, I have an answer to that. So in our closing process, we tell them, like, look, we fully, like I said earlier, we expect between now and when the car's paid off that you might need some help with the payment, but you have to communicate with us. We expect a phone call on or before the due date of the payment.
Right. Yeah.
We don't want to be calling you a week or 2 weeks down the road, can't get a hold of you. You have to communicate with us. Right. And ultimately, if you'll communicate with us, there's very few things that will happen that we can't work through as long as you'll communicate with us and uphold your promises.
Yeah. And I can share that Seth indicated that they started out, in a different way, and that they learned quickly that they kind of he was concerned, I think, that having an open door policy would be a problem. And he soon got more comfortable with it because it does encourage communication. And again, we will talk about that more on a future episode.
There's lots to unpack.
I think it's just what I'm hearing is, so I don't know that I got a full clarification, Justin, from you guys, just kind of recapping. What are you changing, if anything, in terms of your approach to collections now?
Yeah, at this moment, not really changing anything. We're still staying strong at our 7, and some additional situations have come up. I think it's a little bit more volatile, but we're still just trying to handle a situation at a time. We're not revamping the department and we're doing this and doing that. I mean, we always encourage communication, and we're just trying to handle each situation as it comes up. And that's basically the approach. Nothing drastically, or requires intervention. We're just watching it, making sure our collection dollars are there. And, we all know we've had some increased sales, and a lot of times that does come with increased repossessions. But, for the most part, as long as, you're picking up your cars and we're still communicating with our people and making sure they're abiding by their promises, that's about, I think the circle's just turning a little bit faster, and we're seeing what's happening because we're hearing the news. I personally think we're going to be okay in Buy Here, Pay Here. I think it's going to be better news that everybody's alluding to.
I agree.
I think we'll get some, as financing arms dry up on some of the big subprime banks and credit unions, and I think we'll go back to. I remember, back in the days where nobody would take a subprime customer, and so we'll see what happens with that. But that's about where we're at, guys.
Yeah.
Good. I think, Maggie's main purpose there, she's talking about a free ham or turkey, which we've talked about that with the Wallmans and done some of those kind of things. They've done that. I think the main idea there is we talk about that. We see across the country in collections that often what happens is we see dealers using the punitive side, the kind of the idea of, in the idea of reward and punishment, which is basic psychology. We see a lot of dealers using the punitive side of collections, enforcement, but not so much the reward side. And so we're just always encouraging anything you can do to reward on-time payments, even if it's just a verbal acknowledgement when they make the payment. Even that alone is something. But
and we all know that when we get a good pat on the back or like, hey, you did a great job, and here's that, it encourages us to do it again. And do it again and do it again and do it again. So that is, that's a big one. So
very good.
Hey guys, thanks so much. We really appreciate you joining us today. Hope that we can bring you on again at some time. That it wasn't too painful. I know that sometimes we'll get something from a person that we've asked to be a guest, and it's like, I can't go on camera. This doesn't really feel like you're on camera. It just feels like you're having a conversation, at least to me. So
for the record, I wasn't laughing at you. I was laughing at the private chat. I typed in there. I said, who there for my Bengals?
About Oklahoma State? Yeah.
Oh, did you comment about Oklahoma? I got to get
they did. They did. It's okay though.
It's all right. We're used to being the
It's
the
okay.
underdog. It'll be a fun game.
Again, thank you guys very much for joining us. Stick around on backstage so we can say proper goodbye when we wrap things up. And also, if you guys ever have another topic or something you think that we should talk about, let us know. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Thanks, gentlemen. We'll stand by just a minute.
All right. Moral of the story to me is like, one, make sure that you know what your state laws are if you're going to make any kind of adjustments, change. And two, make sure that there are a lot of DMSs out there that you can choose from, and some are easier to use with that than others. And, I was glad to hear that Keith's DMS shifted a little bit with COVID, because that makes a big difference, because dealers can be really handcuffed to what can I do? What can't I do? And so if you don't have the ability to shuck and jive, you may have to restructure the entire loan in order to make it work. And I would also say, we've talked about this, and you can do it through different companies, or you can do it just with an understanding. Tax time payments can sometimes help an awful lot.
Sure.
And so there are organizations that do that can help you with all of the software. And then there are some, we were talking to someone I've recently says, I've never used a company. But it's been something like, this is what we'll offer you. Sign on the dotted line that you'll come in and make this tax time payment. So those are other things that can actually help. So
absolutely.
What else?
I think that's it. I mean,
Right.
Just quickly on that stuff. If you think about it, if a customer can pay $1,200 in tax refund, that's equivalent to $100 a month in their payment. So if we could stand it, like if we're playing a long game as dealers, if we could somehow structure that in the deal and help the customer get caught up, it might be a way for us to bridge year to year.
I really, that one of the things that Keith said that just like it hit me, and I was like, let's look at this a little bit differently. When people had extra money in their pockets, they paid better.
Yeah.
And so, so
it's not a willingness to pay.
So it's not a willingness to pay, it's ability to pay.
Right.
So, all right. At least I'm seeing that's a bigger thing than maybe we thought it was.
Yep.
Okay,
folks. Don't forget the time change this weekend.
Yes.
And we'll see you
time
back
change.
here on Monday.
Wait, no, it's fall behind.
We
get an extra hour sleep.
Fall back. Yeah.
Yeah, right on. All right, guys, have a great day. Thanks so much for joining us.